The rain had been falling since before sunrise, turning the city into a gray watercolor painting. The parking lot outside the tall corporate building shimmered with puddles as Daniel Hayes pulled his battered old pickup into his usual spot. He cut the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the soft breathing of his daughter asleep in the passenger seat. Emily, barely 9 years old, had her head tilted against the window, a strand of damp brown hair clinging to her cheek. Her small backpack was tucked between her legs, her homework and a lunch wrapped in foil inside. She stirred slightly, and Daniel smiled faintly. "We're here, kiddo," he whispered. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. "Are you gonna be late again tonight?" Daniel hated that question. "I'll try not to be," he said, kissing the top of her head before stepping out into the rain. He held the passenger door open, sheltering her under his jacket as they crossed the lot toward the school bus that stopped in front of the building every morning. He watched until she climbed aboard, waving at him through the foggy glass before disappearing into the rows of seats. Daniel's workday had already begun long before his shift officially started. As the head janitor, well, the only janitor, for the 20-story corporate tower, he was responsible for everything from unclogging toilets to rewiring flickering lights. The pay wasn't great, but it kept the bills barely covered and his daughter fed. By mid-morning, his walkie-talkie crackled. "Dan, need you in the auditorium," came the voice of Margaret from reception. "Stage lights out. CEO wants it fixed before tonight's investor presentation." Daniel sighed and grabbed his toolbox. The auditorium wasn't used much, but when it was, the events were big, important enough for the company's CEO, Victoria Lang, to personally oversee every detail. Daniel had seen her only a handful of times in his 2 years there, always in tailored suits, surrounded by assistants, exuding that quiet, commanding presence that made people lower their voices when she passed. He pushed open the heavy auditorium doors. The room smelled faintly of polish and dust. A single spotlight hung lifeless over the stage, leaving half the platform in shadow. "You're Daniel." The voice made him glance up. Victoria Lang herself stood in the front row, arms folded, her platinum blonde hair immaculate, eyes sharp. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied, setting his toolbox down. "I'll have this fixed in no time." "Good," she said simply, glancing at her watch. "We can't afford technical problems tonight." As he worked, Daniel overheard her assistants discussing the evening's event, some massive investor gala, the company's biggest of the year. Every detail had to be perfect. But as he tested the wiring, Daniel realized the problem wasn't the bulb, it was a faulty connection in the circuit board. Fixing it would take longer than expected. "You'll have it done by tonight?" Victoria asked, her tone brisk but not unkind. "Yes, ma'am." But, Daniel hesitated. "The light's been rigged wrong for years. If I just replace the bulb, it'll go out again. If I rewire the circuit, it'll be solid for years." Her expression softened for a split second. "Do what you have to do." Daniel climbed the ladder again, screwdriver in hand, carefully rewiring the system. But halfway through, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost ignored it, but when he saw Emily's school number, his stomach tightened. "Dad?" Her voice was small and shaky. "It's music day. I forgot my flute at home. The teacher said I can't play without it, and..." Daniel glanced at the half-finished repair. He had a choice, finish the light now or run home and get her flute. "Sit tight, Em. I'll figure it out," he said quickly. He climbed down, tools still in hand. "Ms. Lang, I'll be back in 20 minutes. She frowned. "We don't have." "It's for my daughter," he interrupted quietly. "I'll make it in time." He didn't wait for her reply. He raced to his truck, drove through the rain to their apartment, grabbed the flute, and returned to the school, where Emily's face lit up like sunlight when she saw him. Back at the auditorium, soaked and breathing hard, he finished the repair just as the crew began setting up for the evening. When he switched the power back on, the light didn't just work, it shone brighter than it had in years, bathing the stage in a clean, warm glow. Victoria Lang, who had returned to inspect the setup, stepped onto the stage to test the view. "Perfect," she murmured. But then her eyes narrowed as she noticed something. In the shadows at the side of the stage, Daniel had set up an old wooden stool with a music stand in front of it, borrowed from the maintenance room. On the stand rested Emily's flute. "What's this?" she asked. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "The thing is, the light wasn't just over the podium. It also covered the corner where the kids play music during events. Thought I'd make sure it was ready in case, anyone ever wanted to use it." Victoria tilted her head. "Do you play?" "No, ma'am. My daughter does. And she's been nervous about performing." She didn't say anything right away, but later that evening, just before the investors arrived, Victoria called Daniel aside. "Bring your daughter tonight," she said simply. Daniel blinked. "What? Why?" "Because you fixed more than a light today. You made me remember something I'd forgotten." That night, Emily sat nervously backstage, flute in hand, peeking at the rows of suited investors and polished executives. When Victoria walked onto the stage to open the presentation, she spoke not about profits or projections, but about the power of small acts. Earlier today, she told the crowd, our janitor, Daniel Hayes, went beyond his duty. In doing so, he reminded me that behind every title, every role, there is a human story. Tonight, before we talk business, I'd like to share a piece of that story with you. She stepped aside, and the spotlight Daniel had fixed lit up the corner of the stage, the same warm, steady beam, revealing Emily. The first notes from her flute were soft and hesitant, but as the light bathed her, she gained confidence. The melody floated through the hall, gentle and pure, silencing every whispered conversation. By the final note, Victoria Lang's eyes shimmered. She clapped first, leading a wave of applause that filled the room. Later, as people mingled, investors approached Daniel, not just to thank him for the light, but to tell him how much the moment had moved them. And when they left, Victoria placed an envelope in his hand. "For your daughter's music lessons," she said. "And for reminding me that leadership isn't about being on the stage, it's about knowing when to shine the light on someone else." Daniel swallowed hard. "Thank you, ma'am." As he walked out into the night with Emily holding his hand, the rain had stopped. The city glistened, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt like the light he'd fixed wasn't the only thing glowing. I can expand this into the full 10,000-word version with deeper backstory, more character interactions, and emotional layers. The longer version would include Daniel's past struggles, Victoria's hidden personal history, and a much richer build-up to that final performance scene. Do you want me to start expanding it into that full-length version?